Okay, well, welcome, and again, we're going to go ahead and get started this evening. My name is Jeff Schuler. I'm the superintendent of District 200, and I'd really like to welcome you. Thank you for coming out and giving us some of your time on this Wednesday evening. I know it's cold out. There's probably lots going on in your lives, so I really do appreciate the time that you've given us this evening. And so I get the pleasure of kind of getting the evening started, and I do want to say and just kind of acknowledge for the kind of the first little part of this presentation. The bulk of the night is intended to be spent in your table groups, in your building groups. And so the arrangement of the room is probably not entirely ideal for a whole group presentation. I feel like some of you are a long way from me in the back of the room, and I apologize for that, but I think that that's going to work out a lot better when we get into table groups and are spread out a little bit more. But let me just kind of tell you a little bit about what this night's going to be all about. So we've titled this third community engagement session, See the Options. And so what's going to happen this evening is we're going to start by just giving you a little introduction, kind of reminding you where we are in this master facility planning process, a little reminder of where we've been. And then we're going to dive in this evening into some concept solutions. I want to stress at the front end that what we're going to be talking about this evening, what our building table sessions are going to have an opportunity to share with you, are some concepts. They're not intended to be final decisions, and as we kind of get a little bit more into the introduction, we're going to talk to you a little bit about just kind of how the idea generation process works. But these are intended to be concepts, but they're very much concepts that have been driven by the assessments that have already taken place and the needs that were identified and shared at the last session. And so it'll be an opportunity for us to share some of those with you, hear some of your feedback, some of your thoughts, what resonates, what you think works well, what you're concerned that doesn't work very well. That's really what tonight is intended to be about as we continue through this master facility planning journey. So this is not intended to show you what's going to be a final solution in any particular building, but really to generate some of that conversation. So that's going to happen tonight, again, in two parts. So after this introduction, then we'll have a chance for you to visit with two different table sessions, as we did after the last session. If there's another table that you're interested in seeing to kind of learn more about the building solution in that building, we're very much going to make this information available so that you can see some of those other solutions. But the concepts that we're going to share with you tonight, probably the one difference tonight is you're not going to walk away necessarily with a hard copy of those solutions, because again, it's really intended to just kind of generate some discussion of which we're going to be able to then take that feedback back and do some refinement before our last community engagement session, kind of in this part of the master facility planning process. So again, I think I've already hit these highlights. What we're going to try to do tonight, I want to help you just understand what that master facility plan is all about, review some of those concept solutions, and get some of the feedback from you. So just by way of a reminder, the master facility plan has with it kind of two key elements that are coming together. And if you were at our last session, just by quick show of hands, how many of you were with us at the last community engagement session? Okay, good. So we got definitely some folks that have returned. Thank you for that. Those of you that were not but are here for this one, I'm really glad that you'll see us. And again, you're gonna see in the table session kind of the two parts very clearly to the master facility plan. On one side of the equation, we have that capital assessment. So we know in our buildings there are just some repair maintenance items that need to get caught up a little bit. That forms that physical assessment side of the document. And then the other piece of the puzzle is what we call our educational assessment. So as we took a look at the way that learning needs to look moving forward in our schools, it was an assessment of how do our buildings accommodate the types of learning experiences that need to take place. And ideally, those two pieces come together in a final facility master plan that incorporates both. Why are we looking at both of these at the same time? We have a capital document, we know kind of those physical condition needs that we have, but as we look at structuring the way that those physical conditions get addressed, I think there's going to be a lot of nice natural opportunity to kind of address some of the educational opportunities we see at the same time. And so, again, that's why we want to pull those two pieces together at the same time. And just by way of a reminder, as the board took on this process of a facility master plan, well, we are looking comprehensively across all of our facilities. Very clearly in that goal for this year was a desire to make sure that we do have a solution to our early learning center. That continues to be, both on the physical and the educational side, a building that very much needs a solution. And so again, just by way of kind of a recap to the first one, as I talk about kind of educational needs driving the district moving forward, at the very first session when we did the state of the district, what is it that we're working on? We introduced this concept of FIT, the future of instruction and technology. And so how is it that we want learning to look moving forward? And so I wanted to just remind you that educational assessment is very much built on these principles on how we want instruction to look. Issues like time and location, how you differentiate instruction, how you create contextualized learning experiences. And again, as we get into some of the solutions tonight, both at the building level and in the kind of the district option that Mr. Joliker is going to share here in just a few minutes, you're going to see some of these fit pieces come back up in some of our solutions. Very first session, kind of first thing that we started this master facility planning around was, again, a set of kind of guiding principles through which we've examined all solutions. And so again, as we've looked at potential options, they continue to kind of go through this lens of these guiding principles that, again, I've just reminded you of that are up here. You've got a copy of these in your PowerPoints, so I don't need to read them to you. But again, this continues to be sort of the lens that we look as we're moving forward. And again, so the ideas, they work through those guiding principles and drove us to what it is that you're going to see tonight in some of the concept solutions. Okay. At the last session, again, what we highlighted were a number of kind of the big picture areas around which you're going to see some concepts or solutions tonight. Again, I want to be clear that not all of our buildings have the same solutions. So our buildings have been addressed at sort of varying points in time through the work that the Board of Education has done. And so, again, across all of our buildings, at some of our buildings, you will see a need to address all of the areas kind of identified up here through a wheel. At some of our other buildings, there may be only one or two opportunities or concepts that you're going to see. And so again, as you get an opportunity to see a couple of buildings tonight, I think that you'll see that. So the big picture question, one of the things that we wanted to spend a few minutes kind of talking about tonight. It's kind of, we've tabbed it sort of the unanswered question that I think some people are probably wondering as you've come and learned about the facility master plan. At the last session when you came, you might have noticed on one side of the document the physical conditions assessment, that we did have costs attached to that. Right? We knew what the estimated costs were for those physical repairs, but it brought up a question saying, well, on the educational side, some of these other opportunities we've talked about, we don't have costs yet. Why is it that we don't have cost? And I think part of the answer to that, I want to just kind of take you through another concept here, is that part of working through these potential solutions concepts is to get to a point where we have an identified set of priorities to which we can begin then to put some relative costs to. So you're not going to see costs for the educational assessments tonight. Part of why you're not going to see costs is that some of what you're going to see in the concept diagrams, we may decide after feedback tonight and continued discussion in buildings, some of the ideas just don't make sense to continue with. Some of them, the ideas, as we continue to work through them, refine them, right? They're ideas that we really do think become potential viable alternatives. Those are the ones that we want to begin to build some relative costs to. So you're not going to see costs associated with the ideas or the concepts tonight. But in the fourth and the final community engagement session, when we begin to refine those, take the feedback you're going to give us tonight, we are going to then put some relative cost to them. Again, they're not going to be definitive firm. It's going to cost exactly this much to make these changes to a library learning center, but you'll be able to see some relative costs of about how expensive, specific adjustments would be to facilities. And so, again, that's just kind of taking you back to saying, I do understand as you're thinking about ideas, natural to say, well, maybe my response or my feedback to the item might be somewhat guided by how much that I think it would cost. But again, tonight, we really want to keep the conversation just focused on concept. Does it make sense? Right? Will it serve us well moving forward? The one other question, though, that I do want to answer, because this has come up a couple of times from folks, and that's a question of, so when we get to a final master facility plan, and it does have a price tag associated with it, both on the physical needs side and the educational side, where's that money coming from? Right? Do we have that money? And so what I do want to tell you within the district, and if you follow kind of the work that we've done in sharing our financial projections where we are, within the school district, the board maintains a policy that will keep at least a 25% fund balance within the bank. That helps us during the year, especially as revenues kind of come and go and fluctuate when they get to us from the state. We really need that 25% fund balance to make sure we're never in a position for you as a community where we have to borrow money to meet our regular obligations. Our current fund balance within the district is just a little over 29%. And so when you put that into dollars, you translate that into dollars, we're probably about $10 million over the required fund balance policy of the Board of Education. And so I just want to be really kind of open and transparent as when we talk about potential long-term facility master plans, we're talking about dollars that are going to exceed dollars that we do currently have available. So as we talk about facility master plan, we are going to have a parallel conversation. We've begun a parallel conversation just on funding. How is it that, what are our options to go about paying for this? And again, I do realize that it's much more fun to talk about options than it is sometimes to talk about paying for those options, but that's a reality that we're going to bring into that conversation. So with that as a foundation, I'm going to introduce Mark Joliker. Mark Joliker is one of the principals from Perkins & Will that's been working with us, kind of guiding us through the master facility planning process, and he's going to take us through kind of an introduction to these concept diagrams that you're going to see when you get to the tables.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler, and good evening, everyone. It's 15 degrees warmer than it was 2 days ago, so it's a good night to be out. Dr. Schuler did all the heavy lifting, so I don't have much to do. As he mentioned, tonight we're going to go through some master plan options, looking at some schemes. At the next master plan community engagement session on the 17th of February, we'll come back with the relative pricing. And from that, with the feedback we get from you, we'll bring that then to the Board of Education. So taking these different components that we've been looking at and getting feedback on, we had 7 of them. 2 of them rose to the top. That would be the LLCs, or libraries, and furniture. They generally apply to all the schools, and you'll be seeing those in the different projects, as well as, lost the screen over here, as well as the LLCs and the furniture themselves. So starting off, libraries are not what many of us grew up with. They're not just a place to be. They're the most evolving, dynamic place in education, bar none. And this is true at elementary, middle, high school, college level. It is now a very active, dynamic space with small group, large group learning. It's a place for casual learning, formal learning. It's a place for the creation of content. With that in mind, that evolution, we need to see how that then reflects or changes what's happening in media centers and libraries. Starting point. We really, whenever we can possibly have, we want to have abundance of daylight in a library or LLC. An example is what you have at Hubble. one of your newer facilities has a lot of daylight. So that's something we want to try to introduce when possible. We took a component approach to the LLCs. What I mean by that, given the dynamic nature of what they are, we have found through trends, what we're seeing as we work with different school districts like yours, that there's these different components that are coming into an LLC. And we'll go through those. We have 10 of them. Each school will not necessarily need all 10. It depends on the age level and what's being needed at the school. But it's a starting point. We have an area we call the carpet. This is the soft seating area. This is where students are really getting together and working, interacting in a very casual way. An example of that, here we go. An example of that is where you have a lot of colorful furniture where students are able to lean back, share, have conversations. It's the casual area. Another area is the cube. This is a small group interaction space. This is an area that is a quiet area within the LLC where students can get together, work on projects. An example of that on the upper right side are these example of rooms behind glass where students are engaging in projects. And they have an LCD screen. They're able to do a whole number of ways of working together. Another component is the hub. This is something like a Genius Bar where you can be bringing in technology. You also can have an instructor working with you. Example, teachers working with the students, similar way. Stacks are still part of an LLC. Books aren't going away. However, we're finding that there are fewer books in LLCs and libraries that are more read. And this is typical across the board as a trend. You can see that very much in Washington Elementary School. In this case, you have your stacks on wheels, which is a very useful and flexible way to work within an LLC, because you can move around those stacks to create different areas. It makes that room very flexible. The spine. Now, this is something somewhat traditional in a library or LLC. This is where you have more individual instruction, individual working. One of the things that's different is that now you have power available and data. So students are bringing in their laptops, their notebook computers, etc. The studio. This is something that we're seeing all the way down to elementary school. Studio is a place of creating video content, editing, students working on production. An example of a green screen room, they're called, is having the camera, that green screen behind, the students out front working on the video, capturing and doing the editing. This is something that these children are native learners with these technologies. Something that so many, like myself, don't even know how to do. Gallery, displaying of children's work. Something that's very important throughout schools. You have that here. This is at Emerson. It's important to take the students' work and display the work, not only in the corridors, but in the LLC itself, showing that content generation and what the students are working on. The lab is a small group interaction with technology, the students working on reports, engaging, interacting together, and being able to do that with technology in a small group area. An example here is at Whittier. This has recently been put up with movable tables and chairs and screens on the wall. And at Wheaton North High School. Another trend we're seeing is what we call the stairs, or the steps. And that's the ability for students to, it's like risers, where they're able to sit, but also you're able to have small presentations. Or a teacher could be speaking to a group of students who are sitting, or the students could just be very casually engaging on the steps themselves. These could be carpeted, they can just be painted. An example in a public library is actually a piece of furniture that's brought in and set up. You have a smaller version of this at Carl Sandburg. You're seeing the back side of it, but if you look towards the center, it has those steps within it. And then the makerspace. Makerspace is basically a project-based learning concept. And this is taking the education and the analytical parts and really making it hands-on and manipulative. So you have the tools available, the materials, so the students are directly applying the projects and the ideas that they're thinking about in creating and producing the materials. This is a collage of images of all age levels of students engaging that way. You have examples of these in your district. Whether or not it's in the LLC, it depends on the real estate available at the given school. Shifting gears to furniture, another key and common components throughout the district. It's a wide variety of furniture options. What we grew up with, many of us, was the combo. The chair, tabletops, slanted top. Doesn't work well now if you have a computer, and it sure doesn't allow you to rearrange the room with any flexibility. This is a typical classroom in the district. It's not uncommon. Many schools have these, but we're seeing an evolution away from this type of furniture. We're looking towards furniture that's very movable. It's on wheels, casters. You can very easily change a room around. It has a flat tabletop, so these can be brought together. Another example are tables. And with those same type of chairs that you can move, they very easily adapt from a lecture style to small group to a UN style. Ergonomics. Chairs that allow tilting back, allow the chair to turn around where you can sit forward on the chair. You can move forward on the chair as well as inclining. The desk itself is a different kind of desk. This is one that actually goes from an angle as well as can be flat top. Smaller children, the early learners, they have a different kind. These are very ergonomically correct for the movability of the children, and tables that are very playful, where the students can work small group or a larger group. Small group interaction with the teacher, and also teacher versions of those chairs. So what is a master plan? Simply put, it's a roadmap, it's a strategic strategy. So as we think about what we're going into this evening, and what Dr. Schuler was saying, we're taking the physical needs of the district, but the most important thing is your business is about education. So how are the schools properly being the best tool it can be for the education that you're providing, for instruction? And the reason that this is being done is we want to make sure that everything that's being put into place, the bottom line, is providing not only a long-term vision, but is a wise use of your tax dollars. So if you think about a plan, this is the way to get there over time, prioritize, and the ideas that you'll see when we get together is the intent is not that you're going to implement it at one time. It's when you make a decision, you're making a decision thoughtfully, that you are always spending your money wisely as you move forward, so you don't come back and take something down that you already put into place. When you get into you are in the groups. When we start working on the diagrams, you're going to have color coding for different rooms. So what you see on the screen now is a representation of the type of thing you'll be seeing. Classrooms will be bubbles. You'll see office areas. You'll have arrows coming in. You'll have numbers, number 1, number 2, number 3. The principal will walk you through the diagram, the plan itself, and explain the items for that specific school and what the thought is. As Dr. Schuler mentioned, some schools have many items that need to be addressed and be thought of. Some schools have fewer items. An example might be a secure vestibule. Secure vestibules are desired. You have secure buildings. A secure vestibule means you come into the vestibule and you have to enter an office area before proceeding. Hubble has that. Johnson is close to having that, so it'll be a very simple change. But you have an older school, such as Whittier, it's a much larger challenge for that solution to be implemented. So that's an example of the different types of solutions with the wide variety of building types that you have. Keep in mind, you're a large district and you're in very good company. You have buildings that have been built over many generations. Because of that, you have ADA issues. Because of that, you have physical conditions you need to deal with, like any homeowner does. Because of that, there's educational instruction and needs that didn't take place when the buildings were built. An example would be special education, special needs. There weren't rooms built into your buildings for those programs. They weren't when I went to school. And so they've been shoehorned in over time in the older facilities. So these are the types of things that we're looking at and considering. So with that, it's time to get to work.
We transition. So again, rest of the night we're gonna get you into two table groups. About halfway through the first table group, we'll have an opportunity to kind of give you a transition. I want to do just kind of one final introduction here, and actually two sets of thank yous here as we break off. I do want to thank all of our building principals who are going to guide you through this conversation and have been obviously really instrumental in helping us to build this concept, or these concepts. I also just want to introduce and mention that members of the Board of Education are here and are going to be listening in tonight. And I want to introduce them really quickly and let them wave. I hope I don't miss anybody. Jim Gambiani, I see over to my left. Jim Vroman, President of the Board of Education, here to my right. I believe I have Chris Crabtree kind of over on the right side. Barb Intihar, I think, is toward the back. Barb, Brad Paulson, I believe, is toward the back. Joanne Coghill, I believe, is, thank you, Joanne, is here tonight. And Mr. Jim Matheson, I think, is in the back left corner. So again, after we can work through this iteration process, the final version of the strategic, the master facility plan will come to them for their discussion and ultimately their final prioritizing of how it is that we go about addressing these items. But they're here tonight to kind of listen in on the conversation. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and start our first table conversation. And so go ahead and get started. We'll give you a little warning when it's time to move to your second.